Hey everybody, welcome back to Cecil Scale Models. I want to say a quick hello and a thank you very much to the new subscribers who have joined us. Your support of the channel is greatly appreciated. Here we are, ready to get into painting. We've got our tunnel assembly all put together and ready to go. This assembly has already been primed. This is Mr. Hobby's Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 in gray color. Now this is my first exposure, first time using this product. So far I have to say I'm pretty impressed. The 1500 refers to the grit of the paint. So when you spray this on your model, the texture of your model basically mimics 1500 grit sandpaper, which is where the surface now gets the tooth for your follow-up acrylic paints or whatever that you're going to put on there. Gives us the tooth to grab on and stick to that plastic, or in this case the PLA surface. So far I'm pretty happy with this. This is really smelly stuff. You don't want to use this in the house. If you have to use it in the house, wear a mask, put an exhaust fan on, open a window. It's really stinky stuff, but like I said, it seems to work pretty good. The second priming option that I want to go over actually goes back to the airbrush. It is Tamiya's flat paints. They're XF, which are their flat acrylic paints. These paints are really fantastic. I discovered these the same time that I discovered airbrushing. I want to give credit to Boomer Diorama for basically cracking me out of the fear of the airbrush, and just watching him work with it and teach it and give tips really inspired me to go out and get one, and I'm so glad that I did. And hopefully I can, or pay that forward onto you by encouraging you to, definitely go out and get yourself an airbrush. And if you're brand new to YouTube or you're brand new to model railroading, you absolutely have to check out Boomer Diorama's YouTube channel. It's amazingly inspiring. He's an incredible artist, an incredible modeler, an incredible teacher, almost a natural teacher. You'll binge watch these videos. I'm just warning you now, make a big bowl of popcorn. It's just a phenomenal channel. I can't recommend it enough. Anyway, the Tamiya flat paints. The pigments in here are so fantastic. Even when they are thinned down to this level, you can see how thin I've got that when you thin out the Tamiya paints with isopropyl alcohol, they tend to separate in the jar, so you can very easily see, well, that's how much pigment I have versus how much isopropyl alcohol in there. And you can see that that's probably less than 25% pigment. Yet when you shake that up, look at that. It immediately suspends all that pigment in there, and it sprays through the airbrush just beautifully and gives you a beautiful finish. But that's definitely a primer option for the airbrush crowd. Switching to something applied with a paintbrush. Again, I didn't want to leave anybody behind. Some people don't have an airbrush, can't afford one, they're on a budget. Totally understand. You want to stick with the paintbrush. This is Vallejo's surface primer, which you can actually shoot through an airbrush. I think it's actually designed to shoot through an airbrush, but you can definitely put this on with a paintbrush. I know I've done a couple of these panels with this surface primer, and it worked just fine. You didn't get a bunch of brush strokes. This is quite thin and watery. It's almost a wash, but it worked quite well just with a brush. So you can go ahead and use that. There's also the crowd out there that also just gets the Krylon or the, I don't know what the other brands are, the rattle can, the big rattle can from Canadian Tire or Home Depot, and gets the flat black or whatever and just blasts on a coat of that. That'll work just fine as well. I tend to think, I'm modeling an N scale. If I've got all these little cracks in the concrete and whatnot that I've modeled in here, I don't want to fill that all in with a really heavy paint. That's probably the biggest reason that, should you decide to take the dive into getting an airbrush, that you'll thank yourself for it, because you've got this control. Remember how thin that was? You've got all of the control of how heavy is the paint to begin with. Not only that, but also how much, you can crank up your compressor, how much pressure do you have behind. You've got, fingertip control, how much pigment is going to come out, how much, how thick is that stream going to be. I'm going to pull it back just a little bit and get in really close with a fine little spray, or I'm going to come back here and really throttle back and just kind of spray and pray, the whole thing. You have all of that control. Whereas on a rattle can, it's basically on or off. That's all you've got. The last priming option, surprisingly, and here's the example, was no primer whatsoever. So this was a new tunnel portal design that I was working on, more for the modern model railroaders out there, a little bit more of the modern era, less of the stone and the brick type, with pilasters and one. This is kind of an older style retaining walls and tunnel portals. This is more of a modern style, and it was kind of inspired off of this photo that I happened to find online. So I've been playing around with painting this guy, and when I went to sit down to paint him, I said, I wonder what would happen if I didn't use any primer on this whatsoever. Just straight 3D printed PLA. I had done some scoring, little cracks and whatnot with an X-Acto knife. I had taken a rasp and a file and just really beat this up a little bit, but then I just washed it with warm soapy water, gave it a good scrub with a toothbrush just to get rid of the loose PLA that I had dug up with the knife and whatnot. And immediately, I think I started off with something like a dark concrete or even like a raw umber or something like that. Started off dark and worked my way up light. And I kept waiting for it to chip and fall off, but it never did. It seems to have stuck quite well. Now I know a couple of the intermediate colors. One of them was a primer. I had been looking for my IDF Israeli sand paint, but I couldn't find it. But then I stumbled across this in the paint drawer there. But this was a primer. But even this wasn't directly on the PLA. It was on one of the other painted surfaces, and this got watered down like crazy with water, and it all stuck. So that was kind of a surprise to me that I could get that decent of a result with absolutely no primer, just on bare PLA. Okay, so I was just doing some airbrushing there with Tamiya's XF flat black and linoleum deck brown, just basically mixed 50-50, and then super thin, probably less than 25% of the actual pigment from the bottle, and the rest just straight isopropyl alcohol. Now, why am I painting this upside down, right? This tunnel portal assembly goes this way. Sorry, let me zoom out just a little hair here for you. Why am I painting this upside down? Well, I'm painting or forcing the shadow using the, let's just call it the blackout or the umber. Any brown and black really will do. But I'm hitting all of the shadow areas, the areas that will be in shadow when the model is done. Remember, this is actually going to be concrete, so it's not going to be this dark at all. It's going to be grays and resembling concrete. But I'm painting in the shadow even into the tiny little cut lines and along the top edge, which explains why down at the bottom here, like I don't care about hitting this, so much. The panel is going to go in here, right, and cover a lot of that top ledge. All you'll see is the little bullnose here, but that's going to be in direct quote-unquote sunlight. So anytime you're painting any sort of model, you have to really force that concept of sunlight coming down on the top and shadow underneath. I'm going to show you a couple pictures here. of when this tree was being made. Now, what does a wire twisted red pine tree have in common with the tunnel portal? Well, it's the painting theory. Okay, so you see how the bottom, when I sprayed this, it was with this raw umber, and I really hit it from this direction, from the bottom. And then when I switched over to I don't even remember what it was more of like a rusty brown. This is a red pine, so it was, I think it was actually some Vallejos or something, but I was hitting it with those light colors from the top. Now, it doesn't really translate well like this through video, but in person, you definitely get that, especially if you're viewing, your layout at eye level, where the viewer can get that subtle difference on the trunks, or the limbs, pardon me, where the bottom half has picked up all of the dark paint and the top half has picked up the highlights. And we're all familiar with the dry brushing technique of, just hitting white, especially in scenery, just very lightly dry brushing the top edges of cliffs and things like that. Well, it's sort of the same idea, but this is really forcing it and really emphasizing it. So anytime you're painting anything like that for scenery wise on your model, you really want to paint in those shadows before you move on to any of the colors. All right. I just wanted to point out too this theory that we were talking about earlier of the light and shadow with the tree. Remember the tree, the shadow on the bottom of the tree, and the sunlight being painted on the top of the tree. We're painting in color, but this is going from dark to light. We're painting in the shadow, and then we're working backwards up to the lightest colors. So same idea as the tree. I'm not sure if this is going to come out on camera, but when I tilt this down this way, all of this gray paint, or this taupe, was sprayed kind of down in this direction. I wasn't spinning it flat and spraying it the way we saw with the raw umber, where I was hitting that shadow from every single direction. Right, when I decided I was going to paint my gray, I picked my direction and I propped these up against something, and I was painting down. Right, so this is kind of the generic, looks the same from every direction, but when I tilt this one up, I get a little bit less shadow, and when I tilt it back down this way, I get a little bit more shadow because more of that umber is showing up there.